Former Statistician General Pali Lehohla says South Africa is in some kind of crossroads and has in fact appealed to the president to take a more innovative approach in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Lehohla says the answer to that dilemma is not just finding the balance between saving lives and saving the economy. This was detailed in a recent opinion piece, and he joins us now to give us a bit more insight to his thoughts. Dr. Lehohla, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. In fact, you say this crossroads is a matter of demographic determinism. What do you mean by that?
You see, borrowing the term demographic determinism, having observed what was happening in China, in particular around Hong Kong, and the British agreeing with the Chinese that from 1849, Hong Kong would get its independence in 2000. It was 1997, rather. It was a long time. The Chinese would have said, let's leave this to demographic determinism because our numbers are so preponderant that Britain cannot afford to have a colony where we have so many people. The Chinese worked on the demographics, and they worked on Hong Kong as a window to the world for Chinese development. And today you can see what has happened in China, both in terms of their human skills and the use of their own philosophy of marriage. What has happened in South Africa? We are equally preponderant. And in terms of demographics, the whites will be a diminishing ratio of the population in South Africa in another 70 years. We see that happening in the Platteland, where blacks are occupying white farmhouses that have been abandoned. And in the future, this will persist because the whites are in a demographic winter anyway. That is, they are not replacing themselves. They are below replacement. But if Africans don't work on the education, they are going to inherit a share which will have depreciated because of lack of care by a diminishing white population and an aging white population. So the issue that actually perplexes me is an apartheid-style kind of police kit police. If you remember when they deployed this kit police to deal with security in the country. Now we are coming with a kids education. You can't play with education and come with 300,000 teaching assistants to play with the education of the poor. Mm. You can still work with the 300,000, but it must be well thought through. It must start with the question, what kind of teacher will we have in front of the children? And then work with the 300,000 over the next 5 or whatever number of years. Because you cannot gamble with the education of children.
Right.
What the government has done is gamble with the education of the poor by using unemployment as an excuse to employ 300,000 people.
Right.
And we cannot doubt that there's an election next year. And this might be the gamble they're taking with the education of the children. They can't do it.
Let me come in there and ask this. I mean, typically when anybody says we're at a crossroads, it suggests that there are options and there are favorable routes to take, at least routes that are more favorable than others. Let me put it this way. But it appears the kind of sort of picture you're painting is that if we proceed, there's an unfavorable position. If we take a left, there's an unfavorable position. And if we take a right, there's an equally unfavorable position. So I don't imagine you suggest we stay where we are.
No, not. I'm saying there is a route that we can take. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. But what I'm seeing now is actually taking the route for the West. When we gamble with the education of our children by bringing 300,000 people in December, and then in January we unleash them into the education system, where we know that the education system is so bad, where we know that people fight and kill for jobs in education. You are actually bringing a very difficult social phenomenon from the society side, from the community side, into the classroom. Therefore, killing education forever. I'm sure Fair would be so happy in his grave that these Africans, you cannot leave the Bantu to run education. I'm sure he's very happy because this is just precipitating and running that path that the people plan. I'm arguing that we have to take the 40-year horizon and then look at the 300,000 and say, how do we replenish our system from today, in the next 40 years? Take the 20-year-old, take them to adequate training, in whatever training that is necessary, that will make and set South Africa on the right course. Not this kind of nonsense that the government has decided on. This is gambling with children. It's going to happen in the schools of the poor. No minister, no civil servant will have their children in that kind of mess. It's being created at the moment.
Right. And the question that I guess comes up, you call for innovative thinking around this. Are there spaces that exist now where you think that kind of thinking is being cultivated?
I don't see it because it's coming from the highest level.
Yeah.
I don't see that coming. I'm quite surprised that this kind of thing is germinating from the highest level in the country, cabinet. No, it can't be right.
I guess, for the most part, there's a perception that we are running on borrowed time, and that is a borrowed phrase, quite frankly. And the question becomes, what are the possible ramifications if the calls you are making are not heeded sooner than later? I mean, have we come any closer to quantifying what this means for the future of a country like South Africa?
Oh, yes. I mean, you are having people who are untrained. You put them as teaching assistants to teachers in class. This is not going to improve anything. Whereas if you take them into a path for training, not in the classroom, you can even pay them 1,000 rand stipend as they train. And you take a 10-year horizon of the 300,000 to replenish the teaching stock. You know what happened is that the mathematics teachers left teaching at the time of when they went and sold insurances during the demutualization program. Who were the best people you would recruit? They are teachers because they can add, the mathematics teachers that can add and subtract. They are teachers because they can approach society. Now you see those mathematics teachers 30 or so years later actually unemployed. The relative unemployment of these people in the 80s and 90s was much lower. Now at their older age of 50 and so on, they are more unemployed because they've been dumped by the insurance company. Nobody goes and sells insurance house to house because of the emergence of technology.
Yeah.
People have not understood this. That is why our mathematics outcomes, although very weak already, they have been weakened further by the insurance companies, and we have not paid attention to the education system in South Africa. We are making it worse by bringing 300,000 kids, like apartheid kids police, and unleashing them in the schools. I ran a census. I could afford to employ 150,000 matriculants. They were fit for purpose. But I would dare employ that number in data processing and analysis and policy analysis. That would be the wrong thing. It would be the wrong strategy. In fact, in 1996, we got a lot of criticism for employing matriculants. In part, this was saying, well, you have high unemployment, why don't you employ them? It was not because of high unemployment that we employed them, but it was because their qualifications made it possible for them to do that work. You need the same kind of answer if you want to deal with education. You can't pull them out of the streets, 300,000, take them to go and do other work, but not to determine the futures of the children. Whatever you call them, you can't have them close to a classroom.
Right. It's certainly an important conversation, especially with the credibility of the matric exams now hanging in the balance. Often it is said that each population gets the government they deserve. I wonder what that saying would mean for us as we sort of march towards the local government elections next year. But I'm told we're out of time, so we can't really unpack that during this discussion. I imagine we will in discussions to come. Thanks very much for your take on this issue. That is, of course, Pali Lehohla, who is the former Statistician General in South Africa. He's penned an opinion piece, if you like, saying South Africa is now at a crossroads, and unless things change quite hastily, we might find ourselves in a worst case scenario, if we like. We'll continue unpacking these stories and plenty others right here on the AM Report. Do stay with us.